Welcome to Needle Stack. I'm one of your hosts, Robert Famosi, CISSP, and I'm joined by...
And I'm AJ Nash, another one of your hosts. I'm definitely not a CISSP, but I got an interesting enough profile. I'm intelligence guy going back decades, and none of that really matters, though, because this isn't about either of us. Thanks for being on the show. Today, we're going to talk about Jason Baker. He's our guest for today's show. Now, Jason's an intelligence expert. He's got a long background in OSINT, starting with his time in the Marines, and he will tell us about his favorite flavor of crayon, I promise you. He's also spent time elsewhere in the DoD. He's worked for a couple of well-known companies in the private sector as well, and he's currently managing security consultant threat intelligence for Guidepoint Security. So, Jason, welcome to the show. Anything you want to add to that profile?
No, you nailed it. Just glad to be here with you guys.
I would say Jason's also a fellow Minnesotan, so it's very cool to have two of the three of us. We probably could have done this together in a coffee shop nearby, but we chose.
Yeah. You guys just go off and do this podcast, and I'll just retreat into a corner over here. So we have Jason on the show to talk about ransomware and how you go about finding the attribution or picking up on these individuals out there. What are the things that you look for when you're going after a threat like that?
Yeah, so I mean, for ransomware in general, it's a bit of a misnomer to think that there's no attribution question, right? Because you've got a ransom note and it says, "Hi, we're Akira, we're cyber weirdos, we're whoever they are," and so you think, okay, that's who it is. But most ransomware that we see on a day-to-day basis works on the ransomware as a service model. So something like an affiliate model where you have a core group or a core encryptor technology backend, and then you have affiliates doing the actual work, the actual hands-on keyboard of the intrusion. And their behavior can vary quite a lot. It's still very standardized, very formatted. And that's where we have the opportunity to kind of bucket behaviors. And what we look for is to go deeper than traditional indicators of compromise, your atomic indicators of compromise. If you're familiar with Blanco's pyramid of pain, we're looking to move up. And the pyramid of pain, for those not familiar, is this structuring of different observables and elements of adversary behavior according to how difficult it is for them to change it, how painful it is for them to change it. And all the way at the bottom, it's like file hashes, IP addresses. We want to go as far up as we can towards TTPs, the tactics, techniques, procedures, and the tooling of the adversary. So we're looking at that. What's the order in which they're using what tools to accomplish what aims? And the more we can kind of bucket and cluster that, the clearer the picture we get of adversary behavior.
Well, and that's a good point. So you're talking about, attribution, but also I'm glad you brought up the pyramid of pain, right? Because it is about making it more difficult. So there's two things I think of with the pyramid of pain. One is what you're talking about, which is the higher up you go, the better your attribution is going to be, right? Because these are things that are less likely to change. Anybody can change a hash. Anybody can change an IP address. Anybody can grab different architecture. So it's a terrible way to do attribution. Somebody goes, well, this came from China. No, not necessarily. Just because it had a Chinese IP address, that doesn't mean it came from China. That's a terrible way to do attribution. Because as you said, as you go higher up that ladder, these are things that are less likely to change and therefore are more likely to be tied to that adversary. Now, the other side of it, I think of from defense standpoints is trying to make things more difficult for the adversary, right? If you can continue to move them up, right? All right, we're going to block all the IP addresses from North Korea, right? Okay, well, we made it a little more difficult. They can't use their own IP addresses. They got to go someplace else, right? If you're able to learn more about the behavior and you can block the behavior, that should make it more difficult for adversaries. And I admit this harkens back, talk about kill chain, right? Prior to kill chain, there was something called cyber intelligence preparation of the battle space, which then became cyber intelligence preparation of the environment. And I actually was one of the initial people on that. So this is how old I am. And that was our concept, was we were trying to figure out a way to make it harder for adversaries, which was moving up that ladder, right? Understanding the process so that we're able to make it harder for adversaries. Are you still, this wasn't necessarily what we're going to talk about, but I've got to add this piece now. Is that something you still use now? Are you still using kill chain? Is this still part of the analysis to talk about that? And also use it from a defensive standpoint, push it back down and say, hey, get them to stop doing this. And then it makes it harder for the adversaries?
Kill chain is great for explaining to technical and non-technical clients alike using the same terminology of what's going on. I think for attribution in particular, the diamond model is probably what we come back to the most, because it gives you a way to start with what you have and complete what you don't. And that's what I like about it. But yeah, your kill chain, your diamond model, there's a different modified longer kill chain now, a unified kill chain. Yeah, those are all still, I think, daily daily drivers.
Yeah. I also will tell you, I was in the room when the diamond model was first drawn. I take no credit. I didn't contribute.
Did you help them decide on a shape?
I did not. I watched this all sort of unfold. It was in response to a rather significant event at the time, and a lot of people were trying to figure out how to help leadership understand things. And a few really smart people in the room came up with this. I was there. I was not one of the smart people. And so it's like my Forrest Gump moment. I was there for Kill Chain. I was there for Diamond Model. So, and it's good to know they're still being used and they're valuable. So we talk a little bit about, the attribution, right? You've mentioned, things that are more difficult, tie better. So what then, right? How important is attribution? Does it matter, who actually attacked you, and why does it matter?
Yeah, I think that's a question that'll start bar fights at many security conferences, I'm sure. I've waffled back and forth on this, right? Because I can see the argument for it, but I think most smaller organizations to mid-sized organizations just don't have the resources to do it, right? To effectively attribute activity beyond like the most in-your-face and obvious requires threat intelligence professionals. And I think more often than not, you're not seeing that in small to mid-sized businesses. Larger organizations, definitely, but that does correspond to frequency of attack and type of attack. So the people that are most likely to have the most sophisticated attacks, the most wide-ranging and repeating attacks are more likely to be better resourced to detect and attribute those. And I think the advantage of attribution is that you can pivot from what you've seen to what you're likely to see next. If you keep getting hit by ransomware or the same APT, you can keep an eye on those tactics, those behaviors, and try and get ahead of the curve, get left of boom, and prevent them from striking your network again. Conversely, if you're less well-resourced, you're more likely to face opportunistic attacks. And that bucket of behavior is wider, but I think a little bit easier to defend against, right? You're not talking about novel malware. You're not talking about really persistent operators. You're talking about people prodding at your network and trying to get in. So is it valuable with an unlimited budget that nobody has and nobody ever will have, and unlimited personnel? Absolutely. Your investments may vary. I take.
So are there particular verticals that are being targeted now? Ransomware back in the day was targeted at individuals, and it started moving up to organizations. And for a while, hospitals and things like that were exempt just because of this ethos that they thought they had. But then that got blown away, and it was, there's money. We're going to go after it. Are there particular verticals that you're seeing more interest than not?
Yeah. So I waffle on the term targeting sometimes because some of this is not targeted, right? It's just low-lying fruit and they're grabbing whatever they can grab onto. But in line with that, there are certain verticals that are more susceptible and that we see more frequently impacted. Manufacturing is a big one that's at the top of the list every single quarter, every single year for as long as we've been doing a quarterly and an annual report. And that's one, because you're often dealing with very outdated technology or unpatched or unprotected technology that's easy to get in on. And two, because whether or not you pay a ransom is a business decision for most organizations. And in the manufacturing industry, downtime means lost money, and you want to try and minimize that. Where we've also seen a big shift in just the last 2 years or so has been healthcare, unfortunately. 2 years, 3 years ago, a lot of these ransomware as a service groups had either an unspoken or a spoken, literally written down rule for their affiliates of you do not target healthcare. And then that became you do not target healthcare, and if it's going to impact the life of people, if people could die from it. So you're not going to attack a hospital, but you can attack, a clinic or something like that. We've really seen that norm fade away a lot in the last 2 years, kind of starting with the downfall of Lockbit and with Alpha 2 years ago. It was kind of like all bets are off. We're going to take down these big ransomware as a service groups. Fine, now we can hit anything. And the result has been a lot more healthcare victims, including hospitals, children's hospitals, you name it, that you hate to see.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, there's no honor among thieves, I suppose. I remember when there was sort of this lock off, like, hey, they're not going to do it. And then COVID hit, and I remember seeing the first attack that was on, an organization that was developing vaccines, right? And there was the debate about whether that crossed the line. As you said, hey, it still wasn't affecting people's lives. It was research, but it seemed to be the first of many steps forward, at least one of the first. And it made sense. Listen, adversaries, they want ransomware to work, right? Number one is you want to get paid if you're going to do this. And as you said, manufacturing, that's why it's always a big resource or a big targeting organizations, because every minute you're not making widgets, you're losing money. The line needs to keep going, right? Well, healthcare is a great target because every minute you're not doing something, people might die, right? Which is a pretty good motivator to pay a ransom. And then, you combine that with the fact that healthcare industry is still running Windows XP on a bunch of mobile systems. Like, it's talking about some low hanging fruit as a target. I mean, it doesn't take much to target healthcare organizations. So I wondered how long it would take till they crossed the line. I'm going to ask you the question that's probably a low hanging answer, and then we can go from there. But you don't see them going backwards from that, right? Adversaries have they ever had a situation where they crossed the line and then went, we're not going to target that anymore? Or now is it just kind of, hey, there's too much money in this, people are paying, so I assume healthcare is forever going to be targeted now.
Yeah, I don't see any kind of self-enforcement there, barring some sort of unexpected huge policy shift, right? There's no floor, there's no bottom, right? They're just going to keep doing what they can get away with.
Yeah. So have you seen, you've spent obviously a lot of time working specifically against ransomware. So I'm going to jump into the place everybody jumps everywhere in every conversation at some point. Let's talk about AI, right? And how that fits into this, but not in a token, hey, I have to talk about AI. There's some really interesting pieces to this, I think. I know we talked a little bit, prepping for the show. Can you talk a little bit of what you're seeing in terms of AI, both from the adversary standpoint, like how are adversaries using it? Is it making them, smarter, better, faster? And from the defense standpoint, where does AI fit in terms of helping us counter the threats from ransomware?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the front end, when we first started getting this question a lot, a little over a year ago, our default answer and what we were actually seeing at the time was that AI was primarily used as an augmenting tool to help make social engineering better, right? Make a more believable phishing page, maybe help somebody with phishing or whichever ishing they're using now. That was kind of the limit of it. We weren't really seeing it out in the wild. Fast forward to today, that's unfortunately just no longer the case. One of the things that we do at Guidepoint is ransomware negotiations. And I can't tell you how much better the English of these presumably Russian teenagers has gotten in the last year, thanks to ChatGPT. There's been recent reporting from some of these LLM companies, Anthropic, in their August threat intel report. They detailed a threat actor using vibe coding, right, using Claude, to go through the entire kill chain, from targeting and reconnaissance through to probing defenses to testing out what credentials work to initial access to even generating the extortion note and telling them what strategies they should use to set a demand for that particular client. That's obviously the extreme example, right? And I don't know how frequent that is, but it's an alarming take of how frequent it could be. And the last one, and this is where we cross more into, okay, are we overanalyzing it or is it just better to be prepared, is recent reporting on like prompt lock or other AI-driven ransomware encryptors. And I saw a lot of this making the rounds on social media and the old LinkedIn, and it is definitely worth paying attention to as a capability. But we also have to be careful not to describe a proof of concept or something somebody found on VirusTotal as hitting all of the victims, because that's just not where it is yet. There's a lot of reliability that comes with depending on an LLM that much that a ransomware associate operator also has to contend with, that makes it not quite viable yet. That's me off my soapbox on that.
Right. And I've talked to experts who've said AI can do everything with ransomware except launching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you can drop malware anywhere. It still needs to run, right? And you still need to navigate all the defenses in your way. It's impossible to predict that. But I think the biggest thing with it is you can't build a brand and a reputation if you have unreliable decryption for ransomware encryption, for example. And with an LLM, the consistency that you're getting with it, you put in the same input, you get different outputs each and every time. I'm not smart enough to speak more in depth than that, but it's a problem that I know about that they still have to contend with.
Yeah, definitely. There's consistency. And sometimes, have it write something and ask for a word count. It's amazing how it gets the word count wrong almost every time.
Neither can I, though, is the problem. So.
but as you said, it's certainly improving. It improves the lures, right? It improves, people can use AI to write much better email lures and much better, attraction for people, right? To get somebody to click the link, right? And it works better on the back end for the ransomware negotiation and some of the communications across language. And I think I even read that people are using it to help develop better scenarios. Again, you can help it write better, like I said, lures again. So more research on an organization, what's likely to work against a specific individual or organization to get them to, believe that whatever ruse this is real, get them to click the link, get them to click the attachment, whatever that might be. But as far as actually writing the code and launching and executing, it seems like we're not there yet, which is probably a good thing. But at a couple $100 a month and the average ransomware is worth like $5 million, my guess is we're going to see adversaries continue to try using it because it seems like there's a lot of profit available there if they can figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, it ties into what I think we talked about separately, right? It's a continued erosion of the barriers to entry that cyber criminals face. And it's just, it's a very successful tool for that. And that is another area where even APT's hacktivists, I think OpenAI had this in a recent or a year ago in their threat intel report. Is it replacing them? No. But when they beat their head against the wall, instead of going to Stack Overflow, they're just ChatGPTing it, and it is faster.
Right. So from a defensive point of view, are there ways in which AI is helping with indicators of compromise early on? Are we getting better at detecting before the full-on ransomware attack that this is underway?
Yes, so it's definitely helping with data parsing and data ingestion, which for anyone who's had to work around like a threat intelligence platform, that was always kind of a sticking point of it was, how do you take unstructured data and make it structured in a way that all of these different people can use it so that your SOC, your IR team, your vulnerability management team, everyone can use these disparate data sets. It has been helpful at automating that process. And that ties into, I think, the most reasonable appreciation you can have for AI, which is taking out those kind of low lift asks. Where I think it's going to have greater utility in the future is in the pattern recognition name of the game that is a lot of analysis. Human beings, we can only keep so much in our head and recognize so many patterns before we just go and we're done for the day. We got to tap out. But being able to parse all of that information and connect disparate signs of disparate intrusions is something that I know is being worked on kind of behind the scenes and is being seen as a future use case. But otherwise, I'd say mainly it's on the data parsing and the data ingestion side for CTI at least.
So with these ransomware as a service organizations, are you doing like APTs and numbering them, naming them? Like, we've seen this before, we know who these people are, and we can therefore figure out what the variance might be going forward?
So for ransomware groups in particular, I still see a lot of referencing to like, this is a Kira behavior. This is Keelan behavior. And what I've come to appreciate more are from the vendors and the researchers that can differentiate at the affiliate level and bucket within that. To answer your question more directly, I think the most prolific actors and affiliates are getting their own kind of UNC names, their own kind of CrowdStrike names, et cetera. You see that with Shiny Hunters, with Scattered Spider, and all of that. These are the S tier of extortion groups. But otherwise, I think it is a mistake that I keep seeing to broadly categorize everything that got attacked with a specific ransomware group's encryptor as being the behavior of one group, because that's not accurate. And there's a lot of room for us to improve, tie it all the way back to the beginning, in bucketing that affiliate behavior, especially because it's unlikely that many of these operators are operating in just one group. We know of past cases where, an operator will breach a network and they'll try, let's just say Akira, and it doesn't work, gets flagged, something goes wrong. Okay, well, I'm just going to deploy this other blocker that I can use because I'm also affiliated there. So being able to identify and bucket the activity of an affiliate across different ransomware groups is arguably more useful from a defensive perspective.
And what are your thoughts on the benefits or risks from the other side, from the adversary side? Like, as you become more famous as a ransomware group, is that good or bad? On the one hand, I'm sure it creates credibility for them on how, how severe this is or how serious it is or whether you should pay the ransom or not. But, what about, does it bring up more risks for them, depending on where they are in the world. It seems that some groups really want to be noisy and well known, and some don't.
Yeah, I think most of the time that we see really noisy behavior, it is like the calm, scattered spider, kind of what you would anticipate to be younger or less mature operators. With Lockbit was also very loud. Alpha Black Cat was very loud and made a big show of attracting a lot of attention. The problem that comes with that is that you tend to get the attention of the wrong people if you're a criminal. And that means international law enforcement, the UK's National Crime Agency, the FBI. And with those two former heavy hitters down, we were just talking about this the other day, I really think that for the more long-standing, more prolific groups, there's been a more of a shift to a quieter footing. And that's why the most prolific groups out there right now, or the most prolific ransomware as a service groups, are Akira, which good luck finding them running their mouths about come join our club, and Keelit. It's the same thing. They're almost like a more closed, not quite insular ransomware as a service group, where it's not just everybody can sign in, everybody can be a criminal, everyone can join the club, because that protects your OPSEC. That protects you from, I don't know, the more polite term, snitches, right? That other groups have had to navigate. So I do think that the fallout of some very noisy predecessors has translated to some lessons learned for what we're seeing right now.
But that's interesting that you said that they actually operate among different ransomware as a services. They basically move from one to the other. So there's still a shadow organization that may not be branded, that may not be well known, that is causing these ransoms. They're just picking these ransomware as a service platforms as du jour. Whatever is available right now, we'll do it. But behind the scenes, there's somebody there.
It's just about the money, right? What's gonna work and what's gonna get me paid? What's the split look like?
It's a very professionalized business.
It is, and we've seen this before in threats over the years. You know, it started with viruses. They went where the money was. It went with phishing. All these early attacks are just replicating again. And as I said, ransomware started on desktops, individual machines, and moved quickly to the organizations because, hey, that's where the money is.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. It's one of the things I love about cybercrime is it's not hard to figure out the motivation, at least. You know, when you deal with nation states, there's a lot of other things you might have to consider. But cybercrime, I've never once had to go, well, what are they trying to accomplish? It's money. It's as simple as that. We know that, right? So you can start with that. And that's really helpful from an intel standpoint. When you really understand your adversary's motives, it does help you say, well, where are they going to go? Where aren't they going to go? What will they or will not likely do? And it's going to be money. I have to be honest. I'm surprised so many of them still go after, school systems because there's no money there. That one still baffles me because there's not nearly as much money in there. But of course they're going to go after large enterprise and banks and, healthcare and manufacturing. I'd love to see them say they're not going to go after public schools anymore. There's just no money there. You're just making kids not have to go to school. So maybe the kids are happy. Maybe they're creating new fans for the future for them because they're not getting a lot of money out of school systems. But yeah, they go where the money is. Like that's where criminals are going to be.
So I apologize to you, Jason. We had some technical issues at the beginning, but this has been a great conversation and look forward to having you back on the show in the future. You can learn more about Jason in our show notes, where you can also find transcripts of these episodes. You can go to authenticate.com/needlestack. That's authentic with the number 8.com/needlestack. And there's also a comment button on that page. We'd love to hear your feedback on how we're doing. I know AJ reads every single one of those. So be sure to let us know what you think on social media, to like and share what we're doing here. You can find us on Mastodon, Blue Sky, or wherever. You can find us at NeedleStackPod. And this is very important. Be sure to like and subscribe this podcast wherever you're listening or viewing it today. It really helps us out to know that you're out there when we're doing these episodes. AJ?
No, all true. Please like, respond, share. If you love the show, tell everybody. If you don't love the show, don't tell anybody. But tell us so we can make it better, right? We want to have people like Jason and other brilliant people, who want to be here, and we just want to provide something that's better. So, thanks everybody who does listen and does watch. Thank you, Jason, for coming on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll definitely have you back to talk about more interesting things. Thanks for the good work that you do to make the world a little bit better place. And with that,
AJ, Rob, thanks so much. I appreciate the chance to join you.
Absolutely. We'll have you back. We'll put more time on the calendar. There's a lot more fun things we want to pick your brain about. I didn't even get to ask, though, before we close, what is your favorite flavor of crayon?
Oh, purple. Well, it's the juiciest. Everyone knows that.
All right, for anybody wondering, so purple, straight from a Marine's mouth to yours. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and call it an episode. This has been another episode of Needle Stack.